sometimes you can tell the size of a political issue by finding how strange the bedfellows are who are on one side of it. Else we get Chris Dodd and Cliff Stearns both telling us many of the same things about their concerns about this proposed bailout. Rejoining us now from our Washington bureau is David Gregory, NBC's chief White House correspondent and host of MSNBC's Race for the White House. David, your initial impressions overall of the speech, do you think that President Bush made more of a case than he has been making, than his administration has been making thus far this week for the bailout?
Yeah, well, I think he personally is making more of a case than he has made. This is about a sales pitch at this point, and I think that there was a feeling in the White House that Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, and the Treasury Secretary, Hank Paulson, came up a little short on Capitol Hill in making the argument that this was vital, that it had to happen this week, and that the cost of inaction was greater than the cost of $700 billion for as a bailout here. Our poll today, NBC News Wall Street Journal, indicated that some 28% of voters hadn't made an opinion yet about the bailout. That's a big number to try to persuade. It also is an indication of just how difficult this issue is to get your head around. I've seen a lot of primetime addresses by this president on a lot of big, important issues. It's striking to hear the president try to explain mortgage-backed securities in prime time as a central component of what's going wrong with the economy. But there's also an effort here at fairness to try to argue with the taxpayer that, no, we're really going to try to get you some fairness out of all of this when there is no fairness. The reality is that a lot of money was lost because a lot of big bets were made and did not pay off, and now the taxpayer is being asked to pay a whole lot of money and to buy all this bad debt from Wall Street at a higher price than it's worth. And the president's trying to make that case. It's a tough case to make, and that's the reaction that Paulson and Bernanke got on Capitol Hill, which is why you hear Chairman Dodd and Congressman Chairman Barney Frank as well saying, look, we've got to have some protection for taxpayers, some return on investment potentially, some oversight over Hank Paulson and over the administration generally. And it's also why, Rachel, they want to get, the president does, McCain and Obama and the congressional leadership together to try to steamroll this a little bit, fast-track some of these negotiations and get some political buy-in. It's striking. The president says this is not, he talked a little bit about how did we get here because people want to know that. But just a couple of days ago he said, no, our focus should be on moving forward. But the presidential campaign is largely about how did we get here.
And I'm struck by the distance between the presidential campaign discussion of this issue and what's happening on Capitol Hill, including what the president said tonight. On the campaign trail, this is very much about regulation. Who's a re-regulator? Who's a deregulator? What's John McCain's record on regulation? Barack Obama's early call in the campaign, as early as about a year ago when he first gave that speech on NASDAQ talking about regulation. Also today, John McCain saying that we're running out of time. That's why urgently the debate needs to be postponed. The presidential campaign needs to be suspended. You're hearing both from left and right, both from Chris Dodd and even from Cliff Stearns in Florida, the Republican congressman from Florida, very conservative, saying, you know what, this isn't a matter of rushing. We don't need more time. We don't need to steamroll through here. And it seems that both sides are very happy to put off the regulation issue until after the bailout is settled. It seems like there's two different debates happening here that aren't all that connected.
Well, because there's an immediate need for confidence in the markets, and that is a belief that's shared in a bipartisan way. Now, how you get there is what is the big subject of debate. And so that's why there is this immediate need for money. How much is the big debate as well? Chuck Schumer has said, how about $150 billion? Why don't we start with that, see how that works through the market, see how everybody responds. But I do think that there's going to be separate pieces to this. There will be time to look at how this all came to be. That'll be for the presidential debate as it moves forward. But the feeling is that there has to be an initial infusion of cash to get the credit markets open again. There seems to be some bipartisan agreement about that. But again, the devil's really in the details here because it's a question of oversight, turning over so much money so quickly. There's a lot of Democrats who feel that the White House is rushing them through this in the way that they felt they had the authorization for the war in Iraq put on their plate and said, you've got to pass this right now. And they would say, look, these issues are not new. They've been around for about a year and a half, and the same people who are asking for the money said it was contained at various points throughout this crisis. So there's a big blame game here, but at the bottom of all of this, and the case he was making tonight is, there's not a lot of time for action. There is an urgent need here that the economy needs, that the credit markets need, and that's why I think there has been an ability on both sides to work through some of these issues, and they're getting closer to a deal. Barney Frank says it could be a matter of days before they have a deal, and it doesn't sound like Chris Dodd is saying that they're much farther off than that either.
David Gregory, NBC's chief White House correspondent. Thanks. Nice to see you, David.
Sure. Good to see you, Rachel.